Most people who feel emotionally stuck share one thing in common: they have no idea why it's happening. They go to therapy, read self-help books, try journaling, try meditating, try just thinking positive, and for a while maybe something shifts. But then they wake up 6 months later feeling exactly the same way, maybe even worse, because now they've tried everything and nothing worked. If that sounds familiar, I want you to understand something important before we go any further. You are not broken, you are not weak, and you are not too far gone to change. What you are is stuck inside a psychological pattern that most people never even realize exists. And until you understand what that pattern actually is, no amount of effort will get you out of it. So let's start with the real question. Not how do I fix this, but what is actually happening inside me? When a person feels emotionally stuck, the first thing most of us do is look outward. We blame our circumstances, our relationships, our past. And while those things matter, they are rarely the full story. Because the research tells us something far more unsettling, that emotional stuckness is not primarily about what happened to you. It's about what your mind learned from what happened to you. Psychologists call this a cognitive schema. A schema is essentially a mental blueprint, a deeply held belief about yourself and the world that was formed through early experiences. These blueprints are not something you consciously chose. They were built automatically by a brain that was desperately trying to make sense of a world it didn't yet understand. Here is what makes schemas so powerful and so dangerous. They don't just shape how you think, they shape what you notice, what you remember, and what you allow yourself to believe is possible. A person with a schema that says, "I am fundamentally unlovable," will unconsciously filter out every experience that contradicts that belief and hold on tightly to every experience that confirms it. This is not a character flaw, this is neuroscience. And this is why you can change your job, your relationship, your city, and still wake up feeling the same emptiness. Because you brought the blueprint with you. Now here is where it gets even more uncomfortable. Most of these schemas were formed before you were old enough to question them. Before you had the language, the perspective, or the cognitive ability to say, wait, is this actually true? A child who grows up in an environment where love is conditional learns, at a biological level, that they must perform to be worthy. A child who is told repeatedly that their emotions are too much learns to disconnect from those emotions entirely, not because they chose to, but because survival requires it. And then that child grows into an adult, with a career and relationships and responsibilities, and everyone around them wonders why they seem so stuck. Why can't they just move forward? Why do they keep repeating the same patterns? The answer is that they are still living inside a prison that was built for a much younger version of themselves. A prison with no visible walls, no obvious locks, just a set of beliefs so deeply embedded that they feel less like beliefs and more like facts. That is what emotional stuckness really is. Not a mood, not a phase. A deeply wired psychological pattern, quietly running in the background of your life, shaping every decision you make without you ever realizing it. And the first step to changing it is simply this: seeing it for what it actually is. Here is something that most people never stop to consider. Your brain is not designed to make you happy. It is designed to keep you alive, and those two things are very, very different. Every experience you have ever had, every painful moment, every embarrassment, every time you felt rejected or humiliated or invisible, your brain filed away. Not to torture you, but to protect you. It built a map of the world based on your past, and now it uses that map to predict what will happen next, to keep you safe from repeating the same pain. This is called a psychological loop. And for most people who feel emotionally stuck, this loop is running in the background of their life every single day, invisible, automatic, and completely unchallenged. Here is how it works. Something happens in your present life, a conflict, a failure, a moment of uncertainty. Your brain instantly scans its database of past experiences and finds something that feels similar. And before you have even consciously processed what is happening, your nervous system has already responded. Your body tenses, your thinking narrows. You either shut down, lash out, or disappear into yourself. Psychologists call this an emotional trigger, but that word does not fully capture what is actually happening, because it is not just a reaction. It is a full neurological replay, your brain literally reliving a past experience and responding to your present as if the past were happening right now. And here is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. You are not reacting to what is in front of you. You are reacting to what happened to you years ago, sometimes decades ago, filtered through a nervous system that never got the message that things have changed. This is why the same argument keeps happening in your relationships. This is why you keep attracting the same kind of people. This is why you make a decision you swore you would never make again and then stand there wondering how it happened. It is not bad luck. It is not a character flaw. It is a loop running on autopilot, pulling you back to familiar pain every single time. Now stop and think about your own life for a moment. Is there a pattern you keep repeating in love, in work, in the way you respond to stress that you cannot seem to break no matter how hard you try? That is not a coincidence. That is your brain's hidden loop doing exactly what it was designed to do. The research behind this is sobering. Neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux spent years studying how emotional memories are stored in the brain. What he found was that fear-based memories memories connected to pain, rejection, or threat are processed through the amygdala, a region of the brain that operates faster than conscious thought. By the time your prefrontal cortex, the rational, thinking part of your brain, even knows something is happening, the emotional response has already been triggered. In simple terms, your past is faster than your present, and this is the hidden loop. An old experience creates an emotional memory. That memory creates a pattern of response. That pattern gets triggered by anything remotely similar in your current life. And because it happens so fast and so automatically, most people never even realize the loop exists. They just live inside it, wondering why they keep ending up in the same place, no matter how hard they try to move forward. But here is what science also tells us. Loops can be interrupted. Patterns can be rewired. The brain is not fixed. It is plastic, adaptable, and capable of change at any age. But that change cannot happen until you first recognize that the loop exists. Until you stop asking, what is wrong with me, and start asking, what is this pattern protecting me from? That question changes everything. There is a concept in psychology that most people find deeply uncomfortable when they first encounter it, not because it is complicated, but because it is true in a way that is hard to ignore once you have seen it. The concept is this: unhealed emotional wounds do not stay in the past, they travel with you. Into every relationship you build, every decision you make, every version of yourself you try to become. And they quietly sabotage all of it, not loudly, not obviously, but in the small, consistent ways that keep your life feeling smaller than it should be. Most people who feel emotionally stuck are not stuck because of what is happening in their present. They are stuck because of something that happened and was never properly processed a long time ago. Now, when I say wound, I want to be very precise about what I mean, because most people hear that word and immediately think of dramatic trauma, abuse, loss, catastrophic events. And yes, those experiences absolutely create deep wounds, but the wounds that keep the most people stuck are often far more subtle than that. A parent who was emotionally unavailable. A childhood where achievement was praised, but emotions were dismissed. A relationship where you learned that expressing your real feelings led to rejection. A period in your life where you felt profoundly alone and convinced yourself that was simply how things were. These experiences do not always feel like trauma in the moment. In fact, many people minimize them entirely. Other people had it much worse. It wasn't that bad. I should just be over it by now. But here is what the research tells us. The brain does not measure pain by how dramatic an event looks from the outside. It measures pain by how much threat it perceived in the moment and how much support was available to process it. A child who experiences repeated emotional dismissal with no adult to help them make sense of what they are feeling can carry wounds just as deep as those caused by more obvious forms of harm. Psychiatrist Bessel van der Kolk spent decades studying this. His conclusion was stark and unavoidable. The body keeps the score. Unprocessed emotional pain does not simply fade with time. It gets stored in the nervous system, in the muscles, in the patterns of behavior that become so automatic we stop questioning them. This is why time alone does not heal. This is why you can be 10, 15, 20 years removed from a painful experience and still feel its weight in your chest when something in your present life touches that old wound. Your mind may have moved on, your body has not, and here is where it connects directly to why you feel stuck. When a wound goes unhealed, the psyche builds defenses around it. These defenses are not weaknesses, they were originally acts of survival. You learn to stay busy so you never had to sit with difficult feelings. You learn to intellectualize your emotions rather than actually feel them. You learn to people please so that no one would ever get close enough to hurt you again. You learn to self-sabotage success because somewhere deep down, a younger version of you decided that being visible was dangerous. These patterns made sense once. They protected you when you needed protecting, but you are not that age anymore, and the defenses that kept you safe then are now the walls keeping you trapped. The wound does not need more time. It does not need to be forgotten or pushed further down. It needs something far simpler and far harder than either of those things. It needs to be seen. At some point in your life, someone told you to just move on. Maybe it was after a breakup. Maybe it was after a loss. Maybe it was after a failure that hit you harder than anyone around you seemed to think it should. And the advice came with good intentions from a friend, a family member, maybe even a therapist. You need to let it go, stop living in the past, just focus on the positive and keep moving forward. And you tried, you genuinely tried, but something did not work. You moved your body forward while something inside you stayed exactly where it was. And then you started to wonder if the problem was you, if maybe you were just someone who could not let things go. Someone too sensitive, too damaged, too stuck in their own head to do what everyone else seemed to manage so easily. Here is what I want you to understand. The advice was not just unhelpful. It was psychologically backwards. Telling someone to just move on from unprocessed emotional pain is the equivalent of telling someone with a broken bone to just walk it off. The intention might be kind, but the instruction ignores the underlying injury completely. And if you keep walking on a broken bone, you do not heal, you cause more damage. This is not a metaphor. This is how emotional pain actually works inside the brain and body. When something painful painful happens and we do not have the space, the safety, or the support to fully process it, the experience does not get filed away as a complete memory. Instead, it gets stored as what psychologists call an unintegrated emotional fragment, a piece of experience that the brain was unable to fully make sense of, so it froze it in place, unresolved, unfinished, waiting, and that frozen fragment does not sit quietly. It stays active in the nervous system, constantly scanning the environment for anything that feels similar, anything that might require the same emotional response that was never fully allowed to complete. This is why just moving on never works. You are not actually moving away from the pain. You are carrying it with you, buried just below the surface, while the unfinished emotional process continues to run in the background of your life. Psychologist Peter Levine, who spent decades studying trauma and the nervous system, described this as incomplete biological responses. When an animal in the wild experiences a threat, its nervous system activates a full survival response: fight, flight, or freeze. And when the threat passes, the animal physically discharges that energy. It shakes, it trembles, it completes the cycle, and then it returns to baseline. Humans rarely do this. We are taught from childhood to suppress the discharge, to hold it together, to not make a scene, to be strong, so the survival response activates but never completes. And the nervous system stays stuck in a low-grade state of activation, always partially braced for a threat that, in the present, no longer exists. This is the physiological reality behind emotional stuckness. It is not a weakness. It is an incomplete biological process that was interrupted before it could finish. And here is what that means for you practically. Every time you have forced yourself to move on without actually processing what happened, every time you buried the feeling, distracted yourself, rationalized your way past the pain, you did not resolve it. You postponed it, and postponed pain has a way of accumulating, of growing heavier with each thing added on top of it, until one day the weight becomes undeniable, and you find yourself feeling stuck in ways you cannot even fully explain. The path forward is not moving on, it is moving through. Those are two completely different directions. One avoids the pain entirely and leaves the wound open underneath. The other goes directly into the experience with the right support, the right tools, and the understanding that feeling something fully is not the same as being destroyed by it. That distinction between moving on and moving through is where real change begins. So what does the way out actually look like? It does not look like forcing yourself to feel better. It does not look like positive affirmations or pushing harder or willing yourself into a different emotional state. If any of that worked, you would not be here. The way out begins with one deceptively simple shift from avoidance to awareness. Most people who are emotionally stuck have spent years becoming experts at not feeling. They stay busy, stay distracted, stay inside their heads, and the moment something uncomfortable rises to the surface, they find a way consciously or not to push it back down. This is not a moral failing. It is what the nervous system learned to do to survive. But survival and healing are not the same thing. The first real step toward getting unstuck is learning to sit with your own emotional experience without immediately running from it. Psychologists call this affect tolerance, the ability to feel a difficult emotion without being overwhelmed by it or compulsively shutting it down. It sounds simple. For most people, it is one of the hardest things they will ever do, because the feelings you have been avoiding are not waiting to destroy you. They are waiting to be completed, to finally move through the nervous system the way they were always meant to and release. This is not about reliving the past endlessly. It is about giving the past one genuine moment of acknowledgement that it was never allowed to have. From there, the work deepens. Old schemas get examined and challenged. The stories you have been telling yourself about who you are and what you deserve get brought into the light and questioned, sometimes for the very first time. New experiences slowly begin to replace old emotional memories, not by erasing them, but by building alongside them until the new pathways become stronger than the old ones. This process takes time. It takes honesty, and for many people it takes support, a therapist, a structured framework, a safe relationship where something different becomes possible. But it is possible. That is the part that matters most. You are not permanently stuck. You are stuck in a pattern that was built under specific conditions, and conditions can change. The brain that learned to shut down can learn to open. The nervous system that learned to brace can learn to settle. The person who has spent years feeling like they are watching their life from behind glass can learn gradually to step back into it. The way out is not a single moment of breakthrough. It is a direction, and you are already moving in it, because understanding what is actually happening inside you is where everything begins.